Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Transformers review. And as you can see, I've jumped right back to G1 territory, and this is outwardly not that obviously a Transformer, but to everyone from the G1 era you'll recognise this as being one of the Pretenders. Now this is an Autobot, and his name is Waverider. Now in the 80s they came up with the concept of having hidden sort of robots inside a shell. I have done one other Pretender review. I thought I'd show another one. They're not my most favourite of the Transformers, but they've got their own little niche in the Transformers universe, and in some ways they're a little bit of fun really. Now the basic figure you get is the outer shell, which is Waverider as well. Both parts are Waverider, so I suppose you could say they're somehow psychically linked or remotely controlled from each other. I don't quite know the concept of how that's supposed to work in the actual storylines, but you basically get a humanoid or a sort of monster kind of figure, and you get the inner robot. Now, being an Autobot, he's more of a friendly sort of appearance in his shell mode, so you get a more humanoid character with Waverider. I'll just show you quickly his little instruction booklet, what they all came with. Now that shows the robot mode, and on the reverse you always get a picture of the outer shell as well, the Pretender shell. Put that back there. I would also say, before I go too far into the review, there are a few missing stickers. If you think, oh, there's a bit of colour difference there from ones you've seen before, it is probably just the sticker details missing. I might repro-label this guy at a later date, but I thought I'd show him now anyway. Now, accessory wise, and you've got to kind of remove them to do any transformations anyway, he came with an axe type weapon. And all of these sort of Pretender weapons are a little bit sort of rubbery sort of plastic, so a little bit weird. They do discolour, but actually I'm lucky that this one's still quite bone white really. So that's his little axe weapon. All of these weapons as well are unique to the individual characters as well, so they are particular. So if you're searching out for parts, you've got to look for the exact one. Now you get a large black blaster, and as you can see there's a little peg on the side there, and that allows the robot to hold the gun. Now another thing to look out for if you're ever picking up parts or weapons for these guys is that all the little pegs are still attached, as they are quite tight and do have a habit of snapping off, so bear that in mind if you're ever picking up parts. But that's his blaster anyway. Now other little accessories you always get with these sort of humanoid Pretenders, they seem to always have a helmet. So he's got a little white, almost like a crash helmet type affair. And they all normally, even the monster sort of ones, have a belt. Now this is twofold. It gives it a little bit more of a colour, bit of detail, and a little bit more moulding detail around its waist, but they act to help hold the two halves of the shell together. Now they clip on here, and again this is another thing, if you are picking up any of the belts and that, make sure these holes are still intact, otherwise obviously they're not going to stay on properly. Now to release it, it just pays just to put a little bit of pressure front and back, just take some strain off and just unhook it at the back, and then that just sort of pops off. The same again from that side, and you get a little belt like so. And you do have to take that off, as I say, to open up the shell. Now just carefully wiggle it apart and you get a robot, which I will show you in a sec. Now the two halves of the shell are pretty standard stuff, just a moulded plastic shell, and you can see that the arms stay on the front sections, and with all of these they have little pins which have to line up, and these act as guides to hold the shell together. And again, you've got to watch out and make sure that they're not broken or missing. But anyway, I'll just pop that back together. and they do sort of clip in quite nicely. I'll just stand him back to one side, and then what you get is a robot inside. Now you often have to turn the feet, which actually his weren't actually turned round. Now when he's hidden inside his pretender shell they should have been like that, but he must have a little bit more room because normally you always have to do that to actually get him in. But as it was, that's how you got to turn his feet for his robot mode. And when he's inside his pretender shell, you have to put waverider's arms to the back like that, but they just fold round to the front like so, and you've got a basic little robot figure. Now again, he is missing a few sticker details, but you know, easy enough to pick up from retro labels, I'm sure, and they're not a lot of stickers on these figures anyway, so probably not that dear to replace. And you get a basic little robot. Now, not bad moulding detail, pretty basic face, but not a lot of colour, just two-tone with a little bit of gold on the visor there. Round the back, pretty basic as well, and you see a bit of gold there, which is a windscreen, which again is his alt mode. But anyway, that's the little figure, and as I say, you can put the gun using the little peg into his hand like so, and that gives him a blaster. Now, as with all Transformers, the robot mode is not the be all and end all, so he does have a vehicle mode as such. Now, being that he's called Waverider, he of course has a nautical type alt mode. So getting to that, you flip his feet back round like so. You flip his arms up and back, so it's almost like he's punching the air behind his back. Flip his head forward into his chest, and then you turn the figure that way so his legs are pointing out straight, and then just bend them round, and they sort of almost guide themselves round to the right position like so. So he's folded back round himself, and then all you've got to do is get these little nibs on the side and pull them out like that, and they form like a little wing. And what you've basically got is a little, I suppose, trying to think the correct description, it's not a hovercraft, because if you look in the back of his head you've got almost like a propeller or impeller, a little bit like a jet ski, something like that. So I suppose he's more of a surface skimming water based vehicle. Now you can fit the gun back on, he's got a hole on his back, and that means that the gun can be mounted on the roof of the vehicle. They're not the greatest vehicle modes of all the Transformers, but they're a neat little gimmick, I suppose. Doesn't sort of stand out that well, it's got no legs or anything, or put my teeth in. It hasn't got any sort of landing gear or any wheels, obviously, because it's a sea-going vehicle, and it will just about sort of sit there level. But really, you're not buying it for that alt mode. They've really sort of thrown that in just to make it a Transformer as such. As with all the other parts, once you've got him out of his shell, you can pop them all straight back on. I'll just do that quickly, and that just means that he can then fight alongside himself effectively with his pretender shell and his vehicle mode. Now, as I say, I assume that they are somehow radio sort of controlled, linked, or psychically connected, that they can both function separately but still work together. Probably a little bit like Optimus and his little, I suppose you'd call it scout vehicle roller in the back of his trailer in the G1 era. But, you know, it's a little sort of side shoot of one of the Transformer lines, and you know, they're not bad. You can pick them up quite reasonably cheap. They're not worth paying a fortune for, and there are certain ones which are rarer than others, and obviously therefore they get a bit dearer, but he's one of the cheaper ones. If you're into them, it's, you know, one to start with. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this little review of a classic Transformer toy, and I shall see you again for another Transformers review, or haul vid, whichever comes first. Please feel free to comment or subscribe, and thanks for watching. I'll see you again.